Hey, it's DBJ. This is another stunt work idea. This scenario is a classic one. Seen in movies and in stories and graphic novels, television, for since the beginning of time. And it's the one thing, the one equalizer that creates such fear in people and why it is such a classic idea. Water is a scary thing. This one is about the flooded chamber. The room, the cave, the submarine, the sailing ship, the sinking boat. You are in it, water's rising, and the only thing you can do is try to get to the top where there's somewhere to breathe, and you've got to swim from one place to another to maybe find another air gap and swim to another. It's the flooded chamber. And no matter how you introduce it into the game, whether a player character is driving a sports car and goes off a cliff and falls into the water, and water starts filling it up, or a conversion van or something, they're on an ocean liner and it gets torpedoed from the side, and they're superheroes and they've got to save people's lives, and they have to travel inside of the ship to go to different chambers where people are trapped. One or more of the player characters are inside the ship as it starts to sink, and all the rooms start, and it's tilted to the side, and the water level's coming up. There's nothing better to me than adding that pressure. The water level's at your ankles. Oh, it's at your knees. Now it's at your chest. You got to take a deep breath. There's a crocodile in the water. There's snake. There's an electrical cord. There's debris floating around. You need to break through the gate because you've got to hold your breath, and you just have enough time to pull the gates apart. The flooded chamber. Now, most games, 5e, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, included have rules for both swimming and holding your breath. And although it makes sense, I think I perceive the rules to be one where you are in a situation that is not stressful, right? So, you can hold your breath for 1 minute plus your constitution bonus or something, right? So your constitution, I don't know what number it is, but you get +2. So let's say you can hold your breath for 3 minutes. And that sounds all well and fine if you're in swim trunks and you're in a swimming pool or the ocean and you're diving for crabs or something. That to me does not emulate the stresses of being in a helicopter that falls into the water, turns upside down in the middle of the night, and the electrical system goes off and all you see are the running lights, and you're flipped upside down, and you have to undo your belt buckle and swim to the surface as it starts sinking further and further down, and your compatriots are trapped in there, and somebody's got a broken arm, and you're wondering, do I swim and float to myself? Do I have enough time to take a knife out and cut through the strap of my friend, and blah, blah, blah. All that 3-minute crap goes out the window. And I'm not saying that you can't hold your breath for 3 minutes, but this is where the idea of stat rolls, saving throws, advantage and disadvantage are going to have to take a huge role in what you do with it. Okay? Now, invariably, how I would adjudicate a lot of this is that the environment itself would have an initiative, probably the first initiative, and say, okay, across the board, everybody who's holding their breath has to make a roll. You get your stat roll, your saving throw, whatever, and you make it simple, like a 10, right? So you got a DC of 10 to hold your breath. As players start to do things, the act of holding their breath is going to have to be forefront on their mind, taking up an action, whether it's a bonus action or a movement action or a combat action. They're going to have to spend part of that time consciously making sure they do not breathe. Okay, can't open their mouth, well, you can open your mouth. You couldn't make any sound come out unless there's some way for them to be able to do that. And that would be where they would have to swim up to maybe a pocket of air and travel to another location. I would absolutely instill disadvantage. That's where you roll 2d20s and you take the lowest one. If they're going to bother, you're going to have your players that are going to be a pain in the ass. And they're like, well, I have my shield, I have my axe in my hand, I've got my long sword and bow on my back, I've got a full knapsack, and I'm in chainmail armor. Why do I get a penalty on swimming? Really? You have to ask that? And so now you're forced where, do you take your equipment off? Do I drop the sword? I can't swim through that narrow opening with one thing in one hand and a shield on my back and my armor in my hand. Okay, is it realistic? Of course the game's not realistic, it's cinematic. But I'd slap some disadvantage on that in a hot second. Wait, you want to be fully armed and armored, holding your breath while sinking to the bottom of the sailing ship? Yeah, you're at disadvantage. Okay, so now things start to compound on each other. You're at disadvantage because you want to keep all your stuff. You want to hold your breath in a very stressful situation, and you want to engage in combat. Chances are you're probably going to get hit. You're going to have to make a roll. You're going to have to see if you lose all your air. Now, of course, you got your characters who are going to have higher constitutions. Your barbarians, probably your rangers and fighters, your more physical people. Hell yeah, that's what they do. That's how they fight. If you're a character that's like a pirate, or you were seagoing, or you're a druid, especially of the water or something, do you get some bonuses on that? Or get to wipe away some of those penalties? I definitely allow that. And of course, you've got inspiration in there too. So use that inspiration to wipe out a lot of that disadvantage. But without a map, if you're not using a grid, the important thing is to, as a game master, to use that cinematic environment of the flooded chamber, is both adding on the pressure, how long it takes to get from one area to another. And this is where I default. I'm going to have to do another video about this, but this is where I default to what I call intrinsic specialty and intrinsic professionalism, in the sense of the fact that I could never survive something like that. Like a plane falls in the water, or I'm in chainmail armor and I've got to figure out how to get out of my chainmail armor in a dark swamp while I'm sinking in the water or something like that. I couldn't do it. But my character would. So as a game master, I would suggest that those player characters that are professional enough to know it, to say, hey, listen, it is going to take you 3 rounds to swim from here to here. You're not sure if you have enough air. There is an air pocket in between. You see bubbles coming up. You can swim into the underground cavern and swim up and catch some breath and swim to the other one. You have a greater chance of being successful if you take off your shit. What do you do? How do you act? What are you guys doing? How are you doing it? Do you take off all your clothing and have one person swim to the middle chamber where there's air and then draw their stuff with a rope? Do you send the fighter or the barbarian with all the heavy weapons to come out on the other side of the underground cavern where the water is to defend while all the other players come behind them? Do you each rope yourselves together and grab on just in case somebody can't swim as fast as somebody else? What do you do? How do you handle that? Especially in the modern games where you have like a sinking ship or a sports car, or you're in a submarine and the chamber starts to flood and blah, 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 blah. All those things. Great opportunities for cinematic action. Please use the opportunity to engage the players, especially when you have rising water levels. What's the latest movie that has that in? Kingsman, Secret Service, where the kids are in the they're in the dorm room and they wake up with the water level literally rising above the bed, and it starts to go up and they're trying to catch their breath, and one of the main character swims over to the mirror and goes to punch through the glass and all that kind of stuff. Those are awesome things. And simply by adding water very plentiful element into your game can make people feel that tension and that horror of possibly drowning. Uh, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons has conditions. So I'm going to end on this. They have a lot of conditions: exhaustion, fatigue, and blindness, and paralysis, and being stunned, and blah, blah, blah. I like the idea of compounding conditions instead of just going straight for the hit points, right? By having losses of stats instead of going straight for the hit points. So, for example, in the exhaustion idea, or whatever, you can have maybe do like a D4 loss of constitution or strength or something. If they start failing or start to roll those ones, those critical failures, to get across the idea that you are drowning, you're dying, you're trying to hold your breath, and the air that you want to expel, that bad air you want to expel out your lungs, is just putting pressure against your eyes as you start to black out without outright killing the characters. Although you want the chances that those things will happen. So, not only is it dangerous to be underwater, knowing that you have a lack of air, trying to get from point A to point B, but if you insert anything in there, like piranhas, giant snakes, alligators, aboleths, sahugans, whatever the hell they're called, the lamprey shark-like people, humanoids or whatever, you start inserting some of them, and they go from crunchies to like real threats, kick-ass threats. Especially if and how I would do is institute a rule that if a player character suffers damage, that at the end of the round they are to make a roll to see if they lose their breath and start drowning or whatever. Now you could make the case that, well, my character's tough, and just taking 2 hit points of damage wouldn't make him make a roll. Well, the whole idea is to make like a DC 10 roll because it's easy enough. But the stresses of being in a fight are the thing that if you get cut, if you get hurt, you get slammed up against the rocks or something because you're in an underground cavern, that action will make you have to go boom. You can just imagine like a big tentacle slams the barbarian against the rocks, and all of a sudden, boom, you see this big bubble of air come out and starts to drown, and he's got his knife in his hand, and he's trying not to black out as he cuts through the tentacle with a short sword, because that's about the only thing he can carry with him in his while wearing his loincloth or something. Anyway, stunt work, the water-filled chamber is another classic thing. Guys, please use it. I know I will. Brigade Con's coming up in October. I plan on running a game where it's going to be all environment. So look forward to that. So anyway, DBJ, as always, create, don't destroy, and I'm out.